the VRAM Ivory Tower. It is Thursday, April 3rd. I am John, aka Jab, and we're going to talk about, I guess, for those who are not familiar, Ivory Tower is basically means a secluded mentality where someone's thoughts are really disconnected from what the vast majority of other people are thinking, because most people are not in ivory towers. And this is a business meets technology kind of intersection. And we're going to talk about VRAM for the most part. So right now, if I go in and I look at my system resources, okay, I don't have any games open and I'm using 2.6 gigabytes of VRAM. No games. Okay. Desktop window manager is using the most. It's not being reported correctly, but it says here 1,000,000,000 to 6.7 gigs, which no, that's not being reported correctly. Firefox and WaterFox using the next highest amounts. OBS, which I'm recording with, is using 190 megs. That sounds about realistic. And AMD's Radeon software is using 200 megs. Don't know why it needs VRAM for a software application. So part of the problem when we're talking about VRAM, okay, and some other channels have covered some nice parts, like an example, bandwidth does not negate capacity. Like having faster GDDR7 on NVIDIA's 5000 series, if you have one bucket of water to put out a fire, when handing that one bucket back and forth versus two buckets, you can put yeah. So Thomas Moore's Law is dead. I just was watching a video of his from like a few weeks ago. He says GDDR6 is $3 to $5 per 1 gigabyte, not gigabit, gigabyte. Okay. And for GDDR7 is approximately $7 to $8 per gigabyte. So when we look at AMD and NVIDIA, okay, now with NVIDIA, anyone with a working brain knows why NVIDIA is not giving people enough VRAM. They're cronies, they're criminals. They know you're going to have to buy a new video card, because the moment you buy a 70 series video card, it's obsolete. Okay. Or it's obsolete for its price. So when we're talking about VRAM capacity, because right now we're all still stuck with basically 2 gigabyte modules. Okay. So if you have 8 gigs, you have 4 2 gig memory chips on the video card. And that would be, it's 32-bit memory interface per chip. So I have an RX 6800 16 gigs. That's 256-bit memory interface. So that is 256 divided by 32 is the number of 2 gig chips on that card, which would be 8 times 2 gigabyte chips is 16 gigs. Now, 16 gigabytes is, a lot of people are saying everything needs 16 gigabytes. And that's, I think a lot of people focus on the highest end video cards, because that's what we're going to talk about. And we talk about, okay, what can we actually buy? But the problem is actually in the middle, the mid-range. That's where the problem is right now. And that problem is that 16 gigabytes is no longer solidly mid-range. It is only lower mid-range. Okay? 24 gigabytes is solidly mid-range. Okay? Now, what does it have to do with ivory towers, AMD, and NVIDIA? Well, I think the issue with AMD is that in their minds, if they release too much VRAM, then suddenly people won't buy their professional cards. No. So, yeah, there might be a few people who would say, oh, I'll cheap out and get the cheaper Radeon instead of like the Radeon Pro or whatever. I don't pay attention to the Pro cards. I think most people watching this video probably don't watch care much at all about the pro cards, other than they're, not taking away market share from being able to buy a video card and just relax for an hour or two after your work, right? So the problem is that 16 gigs, I don't know about other people. Now, there's going to be people who play something like Minecraft, say, I got enough VRAM, bro. What are you complaining about? Their opinion doesn't count. If you're messing around on Skyrim without mods or Minecraft and you're having fun, that's fine. But don't never speak for other people. It goes in both directions. Um, now, I think the whole notion that people are going to stop buying the Pro cards because the Radeon cards have enough VRAM, 24 and 32 gigs for the, I will say upper mid range, not high performance and ultra enthusiast and whatnot, but upper mid range. We know Nvidia doesn't want to do that because they want you to have to buy a new video card as often as possible. Okay. You just bought the iPhone 37. Well, we have the iPhone 37.1. Time to upgrade. Okay, something like that. If they could do something like that, they would do something like that. The problem, and goes to the Ivory Tower thing, is when these people working at these businesses, I'll say businesses and corporations, that make the distinction because corporations are criminal, they don't really go out and test much. They don't ask for people's opinions. They don't sit down. They don't go to Charlie or Frank's or Susie's house and sit down and say, here's this amount of money. How would you go out and you buy a video card? What do you do on your computer? How is this applicable, etc. And then a lot of times when these businesses and corporations do that, they find like really, really dumb, terrible examples that don't represent what you and I are doing. Okay, so I'll give an example. I was watching the dishes, watching a Digital Foundry video, and they were talking about like, hey, streaming and whatnot. Now, I don't stream really. I don't really have an interest in that. I don't have the time to set it all up. I shoot a video, I upload it, it's done. You guys watch it, hopefully enjoy it, hopefully you guys get something out of it, or you don't. Simple as that. But there was a point of like, AMD's recommending that they, watch a YouTube video or stream, where there was some very specific test cases, and it's been only those specific test cases. So, give me an example. For those who remember, I'm a web developer. I have my own web platform built entirely from scratch. And one of the truest tests that you can do is have other people test the software. Why? Because other people are not going to do what you do. Okay? Now, I know humans have a lot of weird psychological vulnerabilities. And one of those vulnerabilities is this mentality that, well, I wouldn't do that, so why would anyone else do that? Okay? Well, get in your car, get in your truck, get in your motorcycle, go on the highway, and tell me that no one else would do something that you wouldn't do. Because all I ever hear is, all those people don't know how to drive. Because those people aren't you. And your perception of how you drive, you don't want to use the word drive, travel is the correct word. I'm not going to get into the whole legalese. So the problem is that when you limit your testing and you limit the environment in which you're portraying with sales, because that's the goal here, is to sell these video cards, right? Not really for Nvidia. They just basically print them out in the AI bubble and all that stuff. But for AMD, they don't know who's actually, and the people who are easy to get a hold of are not the people that they should be talking with. Hell, give me a call. So, what are you doing? What games are you playing? Where you're running out of VRAM? What are your expectations? Like, I have an RX 6800. Now, I'm not expecting 240 FPS, 4K, maxed out, ray tracing, blah, blah, blah. No. Okay. I'm still stuck on a 60 hertz 4K screen. I don't even use 4K. I use 25 2560 by 1440p because I do production. Okay, I on occasion get to play a game to relax at the end of my day. On occasion, and I don't get to play very many games, and it would be nice to find some fresh titles and whatnot. But that's beside the point. So when we're looking at VRAM and the Ivory Tower, the two primary issues. Okay, the first issue is upper mid range is no longer 16 gigs. It is not 16 gigs. 20 gigs, yeah, that would be acceptable. 24 gigs, if there's at least 24 gigs, I would have no complaints. I really think, I mean, hell, there's going to be 32 gig video cards coming out eventually anyway. If they do it the 9070 XT and release a 32 gig version, even if it has the exact same number of CUs, just do it. Okay, because the market share is not going to suddenly, everyone buying the Radeon Pros are now buying the 9700, 9070 XT 32. That's not, yes, there'll be a handful of people, but it's not going to shift the needle in any meaningful way. But then, these businesses need to think about how the consumers perceive them. That's very important, okay? Now, not so much with NVIDIA, because people who blindly buy NVIDIA have done no research. If you do any research on NVIDIA, you would know that they are blatantly, unapologetically criminal. They hate gamers, okay? They don't want anything to do with gamers, okay? They don't care that their corporate empire of lies is built on gamers. They don't care. All they care about is money. And the whole we're number one nonsense and whatnot. Because if you look at what they've done, I mean, it should be blindingly clear, right? With the 5000 series that they released, that they don't care, okay? And they're still blind fanboys like, well, it's 2% more performance for another $200-300. I'll get the 5070 Ti. Those people, they're brain dead, okay? Back in the real world, you want to do business with someone who respects you. That's the big thing. Now, the second big issue with VRAM with AMD, as I've heard rumors that they're going to release, what were they calling it? The 7060 series with 16 and 8 gigs of VRAM. Why? I think anyone who knows anything about the industry would agree that when you look at what's out on the market, what's sitting on shelves, the 7600 8 gigs, those aren't selling. The 6600 and the 6600 XT, those aren't selling. They're still out there on shelves, rotting away. And their value keeps going down over time, right? They're not buying them because they're How much does VRAM cost, right? So if it's $3 to $5 for 1 gig, and at record lows, then that's $24 to $40 for 8 gigs. So let's say it's $30 to add an extra 8 gigs. Now suddenly that video card isn't completely worthless. That's a very, no one should be paying more than $150 for an 8 gig card, to be realistic, okay? 12 gig is now the entry level because people are, there's plenty of games using 13 gigs or more of VRAM. And that's if we only look at the video game itself. What else is running in the background? The Windows Desktop Manager, the browsers. And this goes back to knowing how to test things, okay? This is why when I test my software, I want different people, different perspectives. I have a neighbor who's in their late 60s or early 70s, hates tech, hates the phone, is a great example of see what they do, and that's what you should expect from a large number of people. What's a person who's my age but doesn't use tech? Sit them down, see what they can do. Those are a couple examples, and you want as many examples of conflicting. And this is data analysis. All right, you want conflicting data. Conflicting data is amazing. Why? Well, because some people say, no, I don't want conflicting data. That's a pain in the ass. Now I gotta work. I gotta figure things out. That's your job, right? So when I build software, my job is to anticipate what does the user want to do. What do they want to accomplish? Now I'm talking about websites, but in this video, I'm focused on games. You want to load up the game, you want to turn all the settings to the max, and you just want to play. Maybe you want to go in and tweak a little bit or whatever, or hey, I'm not getting quite as much, you're not getting 500 frames per second, you're only getting 480 in CS2 Go or whatever. And that's a ridiculous frame rate. But most people, what games are you playing? Now, a lot of people, yeah, they'll be playing games that are still using 3, 4, 5, 6 gigs of VRAM. I mean, hell, Cyberpunk 2077 uses like 8 gigs of VRAM, right? You can use that on an 8 gig card for obviously not with ray tracing, but so if it's, let's say, $30 for an extra 8 gigs of VRAM, all right, when all the reviews come out for the 7060 series, what's the first thing people are going to say? Don't get the 8 gig card, right? If you want an 8 gig card, buy the 7600 or the 6600 for that much cheaper. You won't get as much performance, but it's cheaper if you really want to skim on the price. No one's going to be buying these cards. And that has a very negative impact on public perception of a business like AMD. Why would you release, if it's $30 extra, it's if you're already looking to buy a card for $330 and adding an extra 8 gigs is you're gonna require to spend $360, then you're gonna do it. You got to wait an extra paycheck or bum $20 from a friend. You're gonna do it. So I don't think it's worth the damage. Ignorance and ivory tower syndrome is not worth the damage of releasing obsolete cards that obsolete simply because they couldn't be bothered to add enough VRAM. This is no reason for it. I think with the mid-range and the 2432 gig bit, I think the issue there is simply because AMD has prioritized CPU to compete with Intel over the years. That's why they've fallen behind on the GPU side. So I think I'll shoot a shorter video about that possibly. But yeah, whenever we're talking about testing and seeing what people think, I can't just get a whole, especially an example. I asked a somewhat technical question, and I don't consider it too technical, okay? I consider it very reasonable mail filters to a group of non-technical people. They're business people, so they should have a reasonable amount of technical insight. And it was, what's a mail filter? I know what a mail folder is. So I think they weren't business enough. That's the problem there. So when you ask people questions, what are you actually, what do you have loaded? Can you open up a program and tell me what's being used, how much VRAM is being used, why it's being used, etc.? And I could tell you guys what's using the VRAM. A lot of these programs are using browser rendering engines for the graphic user interface. Okay, just like when you load up a website, it's being rendered by a rendering engine in a browser. And so they have these embedded rendering engines, and they just blindly presume that it's okay to use VRAM. In most cases, yes. But if you've got a 16 gig card and the video game is using 15.5 gigs of VRAM, and then you have another 200 megabytes being used by the desktop window manager, you have another 150 megabytes being used by the Radeon software, or I guess whatever the equivalent, if there's an equivalent for NVIDIA or Intel, all these things are going to add up. And they can't just keep ignoring reality by limiting who they talk with, what the tests and whatnot. And there has to be a reasonable level of technical competency. Asking completely technologically illiterate people is, what computer are they using? What are we going to expect for how the website loads? An example: this page loads 1,000 lines of data. Well, we don't need that because these non-technical people are going to go through the top 50, if that. All right. So when we're talking about computers, we're talking about tech. There's no way around it. How many people are playing games that have zero technical interest. Now, anyone watching this obviously has a technical interest. I wouldn't imagine why anyone would watch the video otherwise. So, yeah, I really think 8 gigs on any video card for any reason is a total waste. Let NVIDIA do that. Let NVIDIA make an ass out of themselves like they have been and continue to do so. I think AMD should pull the rug out from underneath NVIDIA and say, haha, we're not doing 8 gig cards anymore. That's just you. That's your fool's errand. Make NVIDIA look bad. And that's what I would do if I was AMD. But I'm not in that ivory tower. Anyway, what games are you guys playing? How much VRAM are you using? How much VRAM is being wasted by other programs? You know, what could you do if you had more VRAM that you don't have right now? You know, what if you could buy a video card, memory interface, VRAM, number of stream shaders and whatnot, what would that card be? What would be a reasonable price that you think that they would pay it for? But right now, I would be happy with a 24 gig video card, but I would be thrilled with a 32 gig, 9070 XT or whatever they would call it. So, leave your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching.